Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we have an interesting take for you. This was actually a community supported submitted, that's the right one, question that we ended up getting on a comment on one of my YouTube videos, and I thought that this would actually be a fantastic topic to go over. I don't believe we have touched on it yet, and so before we get started on this, I don't know if I want to call it a hot topic, but it is something that I find very interesting, and it is something that I also feel is going to be very prevalent in kingdoms within Call of Dragons, just as much as other kingdom builders as well. And so we'll do a nice little deep dive on this. Before we show you the question and how we're going to talk about it, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell, and if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find a link to that in the pinned comment description right down below. Remember, new videos always trying to come out at 14 UTC in-game time, and then outside of that is going to be 9 a.m. Eastern. Okie dokie, artichoke, let's go ahead and show this bad boy off. So, if we are to Bazam. So this was a question that was asked here from Josh Ting. Says, I think it would be helpful if you made a video on how to deal with the situation of an overwhelmingly superior group joining a server and refusing to play by the rules agreed upon by your coalition of alliances. The game is now open to massive multi-game organizations from non-English speaking regions, which will swoop in and completely take over servers if the game becomes successful. And the language culture barriers may make negotiating with them difficult. In other words, how should alliances deal with the classic Chinese, Russian, Brazilian Zergs? And so, anyways, with that being said, I actually thought that this would be a nice topic to cover. So let's start with the first part of that, which is right dealing first off superior groups is more so, there's two ways to look at that. You could look at that as a overpowered alliance if you want to consider it that, right? That could just be maybe a mega alliance that's in game that is forming and you just don't really have necessarily a way around that, right? And I mean, even if you look at SS1 as an example, you have TA who's, almost 1 billion power above Forbidden, right? They're the largest, strongest alliance on SS1 if you're just going purely by numbers. And I'm sure member capacity, right? They're 158, in this situation, over 60. And then we can also see here, if you go to the next one, right? I mean, not too far, Forbidden's not that far away, but you can tell based on the density of power and Avengers having, or TA having 4 more players than Forbidden, that their average players are stronger, right, on the boards. And so, right, how do you deal with something like that if it's, the strongest alliance and, as the commenter mentioned, right, they just don't want to necessarily play by the rules? Well, to be fair, in those situations, I mean, it's not that you can't do anything. It's that if, let's just say there's an alliance that AKA doesn't want to play by the rules, / just wants to do their own thing, / will attack anyone and everyone and just doesn't want to work or negotiate with anyone. Remember, I mean, people can play the game however they want. That's first and foremost. Secondly, though, when those things happen, and again, if I'm just using an example here, if, let's say, TA decides, okay, hey, we're just going to do our own thing, it wouldn't be that difficult for the number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 alliances to just say, all right, cool, let's just all gang up on TA, and then once they're, we'll just all fight them, and then once they're destroyed, we'll just go ahead and, maybe do something between us, as an example. That is, doable, right? I mean, a good example of that is if you looked at King, right? So for those that may not be familiar with SS1, right, King, I think, was either the number 1 strongest alliance, or they were, I believe, from what I can recollect, they were the number 1 strongest alliance in SS1 for a period of time before they got attacked, right? And then once they went down, a bunch of King players went to TA, and then spread out, and I'm sure some of the others went to some of the other alliances as well. And now you kind of have this transition that occurred, right? There's nothing necessarily stopping that from happening again, if the alliances decided that they wanted to do that, right? And so when you're thinking about, having this superior group, superior alliance that's coming into a kingdom, one of the great things I really like about Call of Dragons that I truly believe separates it from probably any other kingdom builder in the moment, and I'm also going to make a separate video on this as well, is that this is something that having strategic play and tactical play has the opportunity to do, right? To essentially kind of outplay people that spend. It doesn't mean that it's always going to happen, but the opportunity is always there, right? The ability, I should say, to do it more so is always there. And because of the fact that you have the range play, the artifact skill usage, it just adds such a new and diverse element to the game that factors into creating those opportunities, creating those possible situations where players can thrive in a kingdom builder like this, because it resembles more of that type of StarCraft, Rome Total War type feel, that true RTS feel, compared to games such as Rise of Kingdoms, Infinity Kingdom, State of Survival, Lords Mobile, right? Where they just don't have those features in them and those current mechanics available to them at the level that COD does currently. And so because of that, it just opens so many doors. I can't tell you how many, because it is. I mean, it's just doors that just were never open, were never able to be open before, right until now. So I really can't. I feel as though sometimes I undersell or underplay how massively important it is on what COD is doing for the genre. But then we get next to, right, groups where the question was refusing to play, right, for rules agreed upon by coalitions of alliances. Remember, these are things that can happen in these games, right? You can have people that agree to certain terms and then they backstab or they don't go by them, right? The thing about that is that usually when those things happen, most of the time in kingdoms, people will take note of that. And when those things happen, the next time something impactful comes around, then it's a matter of, okay, now we know how they operate. We're not going to work with them anymore. And usually that's kind of the one and done. It's pretty black and white in those situations, right? Now, if an alliance, let's say, changes leadership and the people who were previously leads are now no longer leads or are fours, maybe they're no longer in the alliance. I mean, again, there are subjective situations that can arise in which you may still decide to rework with an alliance again. It's not always going to be black and white, but as long as those people are in those positions that have made those decisions for the alliance, yeah, those are typically just things you take note of, and you just opt to never work with people again if that's your choice, right, until something changes or until that alliance is crushed. It just depends on, your view, just to kind of give a few examples. And then the second line was the game is now open to massive multi-game organizations from non-English speaking regions, which will swoop in and completely take over servers if the game becomes successful. So massive multi-game organizations, right? Now, that could maybe mean and refer to something more like projects, right? Because you can't really jump in Call of Dragons, but you can do projects where you would have a group of players, as an example, and if I was to show something off here from we'll do it like this. All right, so what if we did this? Let's go, boom. Where's my boomsies? One moment for the boomsies. Uno momento for the boomsies. There we go. So if we go here, for example, right, you'll see that this is becoming a little bit more common now, right? I mean, again, they're almost at 11,000 members. Right, it's going really good, I think, right now for COD. There's some great momentum here. And you end up having more players that are considering running projects. This is something that has been, going on for a while, even before, Rock and ROC days. In other kingdom builders, people were doing projects, whether they called them jumping projects or other. They were gathering members so that way they could have a lot of people to go into a new kingdom so they could be more organized. It just makes sense, right? And then, you probably saw this truly exacerbated when Rise of Kingdoms came out, previously Rise of Civilizations, and you ended up having just this mass spawning of jumper projects, right? So you go, as an example, I can go here to the recruiting channel on Rock, and I just see, bam, jumper project. Let's see, no, it's a jumper project. Bam, there you go. See, there's one right there. Regular recruiting, another jumper project. Another post for a jumper project, another jumper project, right? That's 4 right there. Recruiting, or sorry, it's Kingdom recruiting, another jumper project. Kingdom recruiting, another jumper project, right? So another jumper project, right? I mean, again, these are right. Another post, same one. This is a different one, right? Bam. So again, it just goes to show you that this is something that is going to happen. It's going to stay. And as more people, like for me, you know, I was the first one to really start doing that to an organized level in COD, just because I have a lot of experience in running projects in general from my time playing Rock and then also Infinity Kingdom, where I've ran, you know, multiple successful projects. And so the thing about it is that this is something that will happen, as I alluded to. So it's not necessarily something you're going to get rid of. It's just, you know, it makes sense on why you would do them, just because of the fact that, you know, why wouldn't you want to go into a kingdom with an organized party versus just going in solo? And for the average player, that's what they're going to do. They're going to go into a new kingdom solo. The majority of players that are going to join kingdoms are typically going to be new players. And because of that, they might play it out. Maybe some will seek out Discord. Maybe some will seek out YouTube videos. Maybe some will seek out projects if they have previous experience. But if you're a new player and you've never touched a kingdom builder, you've never touched Call of Dragons before, you're going to go into that new kingdom and just play. You're not going to know that you can create a new character necessarily off the bat, or that you can time out your next, or that you'll be able to wait, right, and just say, oh, okay, cool, I'm in, I'm just going to play and learn, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply everything I learned and be able to progress a lot more efficiently in the next kingdom that opens up, or in a later kingdom. You're not necessarily, it's out of sight, out of mind. If you're new, you just don't know all of those things. So that's why I say it's just important to take note of that, where these are things that are not necessarily bad, or you could make the argument good. It's just, it is what it is. And because of that, it's something where players, for those that notice, will just have to adapt, right? It's either, you join a project, you make your own project, you just go in with realistic expectations that you're just a free agent, right, kind of? You're just a solo player, and you're just going to work your way up the ranks if that's what you decide, or you're just going to try and join an active alliance in the kingdom you're going to play in, and whatever happens, happens. And this is, and I'm giving you a very bare, like a general entry level understanding and psychological mentality on how to do this. I can deep dive to this on more of a macro and micro level in kind of more of an advanced session video. This is really just kind of scratching the surface, because there are a lot more implications when the project scene, I'll call it, is going to start ramping up, because it will start ramping up, right? COD is showing no signs of slowing down, and it's only on a great momentum going upward for its trajectory towards more success, especially because global release isn't even out yet. And so once that happens, I just imagine it's going to be cray-cray, yayo bananas. And then the last part here is, right, in other words, right, how should alliances deal with Chinese, Russian, Brazilian Zergs, and that kind of is what that goes into, right? So now let me say this, and I'll say this broadly and respectfully, which is that in my experience, when you are coming across large groups, that's multiple alliances, hundreds of players that are from other regions, other countries around the world, there are some tendencies that I've seen and I've noticed. And it is true that with some groups from certain countries, it does make it difficult at times to operate as an alliance, and even sometimes more times as an alliance, and then sometimes as a player within those kingdoms, because of certain mindsets and philosophies that said players and or groups have. That can range from anything of, we don't want any of your alliances to go into Zone 3. Right, so that would be, oh gosh, let's scroll down. Where am I going here? I'm Atherin. Right, so that would be, we don't want any of your alliances, and so only our nationality alliances are allowed here. Or we don't want any of you to, we'll only allow one of you into zone 2, right? Other than that, all of you have to stay in zone 3 or zone 1. Or it could be, no, we're not going to allow any of your alliances to exist. Your players can just join our alliances, right? And then you're done. Or it could be, no, we're not going to allow any of you in our main alliances. You can just join our academies, right? Or our farm alliances. And so sometimes that happens. It's not. It doesn't mean that you'll never come across a situation where other regions or players from other countries do not want to work with you. I'm not saying that at all. I thankfully have been awarded or have, with the time I've spent and the amount of projects I've done, you will come across other nationalities that do want to work with you. It just depends on who you get, right? That's really what it comes down to. And the only way to really figure that out is you have to communicate with people. You have to open dialogue and have discussions. And now I feel like I'm kind of going off a little bit, but not to do too much. Again, this is probably more for a separate video. But I do just want to point out that from what this individual pointed, Josh Ting, it is a real thing. And so it's just something to be aware of that can happen. This is one of the reasons why I usually advocate for all players should really join projects, right? I believe that players should join groups before going into a kingdom because you just have a higher chance, right? And it also depends on how that project is set up. And if you believe and you like what that project is offering for the kingdom, there's just a higher chance that your day-to-day experience can be better by joining a group rather than going in solo. That's always going to be my belief, because if you just go in solo and you don't know what's going to happen in that kingdom, you're kind of just playing roulette, right, with your game experience. And so with that in mind, that's pretty much it where I'm going to stop. I'd love to hear your comments, though. Let me know your thoughts down below. Again, do you agree? Do you disagree with anything I talked about? Do you have a different opinion? If so, I'd love to hear. Let me know, right? Let me know as well, right? Have you ever played in a kingdom that had complicating situations where you saw that there were other groups or large groups of alliances of a certain nationality, not your own? And then how did those things play out? Did they actually work out okay? Did you notice more often than not that they just were more restricting, more limiting, kind of didn't really give you the time of day and it was rough to play there and it almost made you want to migrate out or just stop playing that account? Right? Let me know your stories. I'd love to hear. I always read everything, and I always find it really enjoyable, especially with these types of topical videos, because then you have the opportunity for players from the community to come and take a look and read those comments and say to themselves, okay, well, Boss is making a lot of sense, or wow, here's some diverse stories that I just never would have thought of, because most of the time, to be fair, players usually just kind of stick to their home kingdom, right? There's not a lot of expanding that the average player will go and do when it comes to researching other kingdoms, how they operate, what happens, how they differ from their own, and just broadening their perspective. And that's something that I always really love to do, and I try to do my best, at least when I have the time, to kind of show those situations off. So with that in mind, that's it for me. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.